Welcome back to Sky News. It's time now for our weekly political panel, and I'm joined by Ebony Bennett from the Australian Institute and Cian Hussey from the Institute of Public Affairs. Thank you both so much for your time again today. We'll start with the day's top story: 105 new COVID-19 cases for New South Wales, with tougher restrictions in effect for 3 Sydney LGAs. Ebony, was the Premier too late in tightening lockdown restrictions?
Yeah, I think that's obvious now. The announcement, not only that the cases continue to be at high levels, above 100, but the announcement of tougher restrictions is tacit admission that the Premier didn't lock down hard enough or soon enough, I think. And it's interesting, I think we're now seeing a bit of a real-time political and public health experiment happening, and we'll see the difference in a few weeks between whether or not Victoria can be more successful with its shorter, sharper, harder lockdown, or the New South Wales approach of kind of delaying that and going a bit softer. That's going to play out in real time. But the most important thing, I think, from the Sydney lockdown has been that the Commonwealth has finally come to the table to provide income support for people who are in lockdown. It's so important. We know that people will choose to go to work if that's the only choice they have to be able to pay their mortgage or their rent and keep food on the table. And so it's really important, if people are urged to stay home, that the government helps them to do so.
Well, there's more than 12 million Australians in lockdown this weekend. Cian, this is the 5th lockdown for Melbourne. Is this just our new way of life?
It is, and until we give up this ridiculous strategy of eliminating coronavirus, this is the way we're going to live. There is no justification for 12 million Australians to be in lockdown. We haven't seen the public health advice. The Victorian government, the New South Wales government, haven't released the health advice that says that my local florist has to cease trading and I can't go down there and buy some flowers, but the Woolies and Coles can keep selling flowers this weekend. We know that lockdowns work in the same way that malnutrition works if you want to lose weight. We need to end this obsession with case numbers. 100 case numbers, 112 cases, it doesn't mean anything. We need to talk about the harm that's being done by lockdown, which we can't even measure the costs of lockdowns. We can't even measure the enormous costs they're putting on Victorians and on people in Greater Sydney. We know that regional businesses in Victoria have been absolutely hammered by 5 lockdowns, and in most local government areas in Victoria, there haven't been cases. Some of them, they haven't had cases for the whole of the pandemic. We need to end this obsession with case numbers. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't tell us anything. We need to talk about how many people are in hospital, how many people are in ICU, and we need to be honest. This has nothing to do with vaccinations. This has nothing to do with hotel quarantine. This actually doesn't have anything to do with case numbers. What this has to do with is our obsession with eliminating coronavirus, which we in Public Affairs have been arguing for over a year is a fanciful elimination strategy which will never work, and it's not working, and we're going to continue living like this until our political leaders accept that and allow us to live our lives again.
Ebony, what are your thoughts?
I mean, that's absolute rubbish. What Cian is talking about, as if there's no alternative. The alternative is thousands of deaths, if not tens of thousands of deaths, if we don't lock down the virus, particularly with the new Delta variant. And that's the choice that we've got until the vaccine rollout is complete. The choice is lockdowns or deaths. That's the choice that we're facing.
People
That's
die
what
in
other
lockdowns.
countries have seen.
People die in lockdowns. We know in Victoria at the moment that youth attempted suicide is up 200%. Is that worth it? No one in Victoria has died of coronavirus since November. Is it worth the enormous costs we're pushing onto young people, onto future generations,
ask the UK or the United States or Brazil or Indonesia or India, where millions of people have died worldwide, and Australia has avoided that through lockdowns. Now, I'm not saying that the restrictions aren't without a need at all to examine them, to be accountable to the public on how that advice is made. And I agree with you that the public health advice should be transparent to people. But the argument to just let it rip in the community is not one that the Australian community actually supports at all. And really what we need is for the federal government to get on with the vaccine rollout as soon as possible, because that way we can have that argument that Cian is making about moving away from the number of cases towards the number that are in hospital, the number in ICU, and the number of deaths. But that is not where the community is prepared to go until we have enough vaccinations that will prevent numbers and thousands of deaths, essentially. That's the situation that we're in.
Well, earlier today, Greg Hunt announced $3 million for mental health. Is this enough, Cian?
No, absolutely not. And we know we know this is a ridiculous idea that the government can throw good money after bad on mental health. Why don't they just not lock us down in the first place? Why don't they release the health advice that supposedly justifies what's going on? We need to acknowledge that there are costs of lockdowns. And if we acknowledge that there are costs of lockdowns, then we can have a discussion. But, well, then why are we still locking down 18 months into this
Because no
pandemic?
one wants tens of thousands of deaths in the community, and that's the alternative
We were told at the beginning of the pandemic, in the absolute best case scenario, if we have lockdown, social distancing, all of it, we close the borders, everyone stays home, that we would need 5,000 ICU beds per day for coronavirus patients. In reality... And
isn't it great that we avoided that?
It is fantastic that we avoided that, but this lie that we need to obsess over case numbers and that Australia is avoiding deaths from coronavirus right now needs to end. Lockdowns have enormous costs. Is it really worth the cost that we're putting on children who've been out of school for months, who haven't had contact with their friends? We know that does irreparable damage to their education. We are going to be paying for these lockdowns decades in the future. Long after people have stopped talking about COVID, they're going to be talking about the enormous costs of lockdowns.
I'd love to jump in here, just change the subject quickly. Over the past few days, we have seen media personalities Caitlyn Jenner and Katie Hopkins arrive in Australia. Cian, is this fair at a time when international arrivals are being capped?
It's really not fair for Australians, and we know that Australians have been denied the opportunity to come into the country, even to see dying relatives, to attend funerals. We've even seen Australians being denied the opportunity to travel interstate or travel within their own state for funerals and things of that nature. And it really is a slap in the face for Australians when they see that there's one rule for this elite group of people, these celebrities and politicians who can kind of come and go as they please, it seems, and another rule for ordinary people. I would note that the Berejiklian government increased the hotel quarantine cap to bring in these celebrities, but why can't they increase the cap to bring in more Australian citizens?
Ebony, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, look, I agree. Certainly there are tens of thousands of Australians still trapped overseas who can't make it home, and that's a lot to do with the caps that we've got on arrivals almost exclusively. So it is really hard to stomach this. Obviously, the Australian arts and entertainment industry, huge parts of it have been closed down during the pandemic for the past couple of years. That shows no hope of really getting better anytime soon until the vaccine rollout is complete. But there's probably 100 different ways that I could think of for the government to help the arts industry, rather than letting in these two-bit celebrities who, frankly, shouldn't have passed the character test. And I was glad to see the Deputy Prime Minister tell Katie Hopkins to take her bongos and go home this morning on Insiders.
Well, yeah, and it's been confirmed now that she won't be appearing on the Channel 7 program. But look, before we let you go, I'd love to get your opinion on the Queensland Premier. She's off to Tokyo this week, of course, to attend the Olympics. Surely, Ebony, this could have been done via Zoom. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think there's always an argument for the Premier to be there to lead these types of delegations, but she also has to be open to the criticism that the state premiers are the ones who've been leading the charge to halve the arrival caps. So it's pretty rich for her to be going overseas and returning at a time like this. I think it's obvious why she's going, but equally obvious is the criticism she's copping for doing it.
Cian, do you think she needs to be heading over there on the taxpayer dollar?
I don't think it's necessary. And while Ebony and I might disagree about lockdowns, I think we're in furious agreement about this one. As Ebony said, it was only a few weeks ago that Anastasia Palaszczuk was arguing that she was pushing to have the hotel quarantine caps halved. So it is hypocritical that she's now heading over there and will be taking up a place on her way back in hotel quarantine.
It's going to be very interesting. It's been a huge week in news. I appreciate your time. I wish we had more to discuss. Thank you both, Ebony Bennett and Cian Hussey.
Thank you.
20% get nothing. They're really unfair tax cuts.
People want to see much stronger action from the government when it comes to climate change.
It's no coincidence that we have a wages crisis in Australia.
Transitioning to net zero emissions, it doesn't seem like there's much room for gas.